Well, good morning. Always a great day in the house when we have a room full of students, and this is our proudest event we do here in the Education Department at the Foundation and Institute. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to teachers and administrators for getting this room packed, and thank you to the general public for being here, as well as our online audience. Thank you for tuning in. So I am extremely excited to welcome these two gentlemen, as this program is about both of you being in the medical field, which is an awesome way to talk about and highlight a story we don't often hear, that they went into war to save lives. So this program is unique in that perspective, and I can't wait to share this with you all today. So a couple of things we want to talk about first, which is, how do you get a Medal of Honor? How many have there been? Listen, pop quiz audience for your first quiz. How many of you know how many Medal of Honors have been given total since 1861? Good, Jim. Okay, so there has been 3,547 medals given since the start in 1861. Not many, there's only 61 who are living today, and even fewer who are willing to travel, to come here, to share their stories, to brave middle school and high schoolers around the country. So we are honored you two are here today. And how do you get a Medal of Honor? This is just a recap for those of you in the audience of how do you get it? It's the highest honor our military gives, but how is that achieved? Raise your hand if you know. Another pop quiz if you know how this is achieved. All right, to my Sinaloa group in the back, I love it. And Royal heard yesterday a little bit more, but in order to receive one must distinguish themselves conspicuously by gallantry at the risk of their own life, above and beyond the call of duty, beyond what you're asked to do when you sign your oath as a member of our military. You need witnesses, timelines to confirm this sacred honor of valor. This is not an easy task. These men have come to share their story. They work in the character development program with the Medal of Honor Foundation and are here to talk about how do you build character? How do you work on integrity? How do you become a person of valor, a person who is brave? How do you do that? It's easy to say, it's very hard to do. So what we're doing all here today is we are opening our hearts, our ears, and we are listening to these men who are vulnerably coming up here to share their stories of some pretty dark times and what happens after a life of service. Because trust me, they have seen some dark things. They've been on the front lines of war. And they were medics, and they were in charge of medical treatment and care for our wounded and our soldiers who are killed. So this is a very important forum for us, and I just am so excited to be sharing the stage. So I also want to point out that we are going to be talking about sacrifice and most of all, love. One of the quotes that General Brady said that I loved is, there is no way to measure the joy of saving lives, and that a soldier's love is the foundation of the security of our nation. I think that's a very interesting concept, that this today is about love. And you'll talk to these gentlemen, they are full of love for this country, for their fellow soldiers, and for the next generation of leaders, which is all of you. So I hope you take that to heart today, that that's what they're doing here, is that they want to pass that love of country and love of their fellow Americans along to you. So before we get into these men and the soldiers you became, let's go back to the beginning and talk about young Pat and young Jim as they were growing up. So tell us where you're originally from and what you were like as a child until the age of 10, 12 years old. Let's start with you, General.
I was born in South Dakota and moved a lot. When I was young, I think by the time I was in the 9th grade, I had been to 10 different schools. So I have no idea what I was like. Somebody else would have to explain that. But I do know that as a young person, my primary interest, besides girls, was sports. so I was very much into sports. Jim Thorpe was my great hero. Some of you may have heard of him. He was probably the greatest athlete of the last century, and he was an Indian, so I wanted to be Indian, and then I wanted to be in every sport. So that was about it. I wasn't much interested in academics or anything like that.
What about you, Jim?
I was born in Michigan, South Haven, Michigan, and by the time I was a year old, my father moved his family to a shell of a house, literally shell of a house. We had no electricity till I was 5, no running water until I was 8 or 9. We had a two-holer out back. You kids that don't know what a two-holer is, somebody will be able to explain it to you. Went to a one-room country school down the road, south of us, 1 mile. My mom and dad were factory workers, so my brothers and I were responsible for ourselves, getting up in the morning, packing our lunch bucket, and it didn't matter what the weather was. We marched 1 mile down the road to this one-room country school. Kindergarten through 8th grade in one room. It was established in 1849 and built in 1869. 2 years ago, I talked to the students in that school where I'd gone through the 6th grade. I then was, my dad paid for tuition because we were supposed to go all the way through the 8th grade before moving on to a public school. And in the 7th grade, I finally got to compete interscholastically. I'd already played some little league ball and so on and so forth, but by the time I graduated, I had played in 4 different sports and earned 11 varsity letters. I was all conference in all 4 of those sports, and all state. The only thing we could be all state in then was track, and I was all state in track. And I really began to hone my music. I am a vocalist, and I had 4 leads and 4 musicals.
Quite a Renaissance man over there. Well, Doc, what you said is your actions have to be given credit to your teachers, coaches, family, parents. And I'd love for you to speak about that. If you had any of those to mentor you, help you along the way, and then we'll pass it to you, General. So did you have a specific mentor or coach that really supported you in your early years of growing up?
Yeah, I first have to say my father was my hero. That house that we moved into, I watched my dad put the basement in under the house with a shovel, a wheelbarrow, a mixer, and the big cement bricks that went under there. So he, although we didn't have any money, we weren't poor. He made sure there was a lot of love. He made sure that that house eventually became a home. He was my big hero and the person that was my cheerleader and encourager and so on and so forth. But my Uncle Jack, my dad was 14 when my Uncle Jack was born, so Jack and I were only 10 years apart, and a lot of people thought we were brothers. But he was an excellent athlete, so I followed in his footsteps. He was small, short, like I was, and I was always small along the way. When I started competing at junior high, I was 4'7". I was a giant of a man by the time I went into high school. I was 4'10", and I graduated at 5'2". Later on, it would be my reason for not being accepted into the state police because you had, in the early 60s, you had to be 6 foot tall, and that eliminated me. But my football coach in high school and my wrestling coach in college were 2 very influential people. My college coach, I actually sang at his funeral, and he encouraged me into coaching and teaching. So those 2 individuals, and especially my dad and my Uncle Jack.
Great, thank you. What about you, General?
I think mentorship is so important, and I think that's why museums and places like this are so important, because they're a form of mentorship. And the recipients themselves are, through a lot of different ways, mentors. And my mentors in my lifetime, I came from a kind of a split home and stuff, and I was in boarding school with the Christian Brothers of Ireland. Now, these are big, tough, mean guys. And the crack, you know, if you guys would be horrified to hear how they punished us in those days. They didn't hit us physically, but they hit our hand. A crack was the sound of an Irishman's belt hitting your hand. And so we all played handball to try and get through that. But they were my mentors. These were men, these were educators, they were athletes, they were all men. And the importance of mentorship, the story I tell is about this great woman who was a physician in Vietnam, Doc Smith. She ran a mountain yard hospital. Vietnamese would not treat the mountain yards, they're an Aborigine group, in their hospitals. So I couldn't take my patients, mountain yard patients, I had to take them to Doc Smith. And so I got to know her pretty well, and the Viet Cong and the communists hated her because the people loved her. And so this Viet Cong went through a village, they killed everybody in the village except this little baby who was laying on his mother's chest. And Doc Smith got that baby, took that baby in, and found that baby's brother. Now these are primitive people, live in hooches with dirt floors. The men wore a loincloth. The women were naked to the waist. The men hunted tigers with a crossbow. They were big, powerful men, great allies of the Americans in Vietnam. Well, anyhow, to make it a little shorter, she took these two mountain yard children, these Aborigine children, when they ran her out of the country with her to America. And she loved them. And today, or the last time I saw her, one of those children was a Navy dentist, and the other one was a well-known musician in Seattle. So it just goes to show that it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, your parents, nothing matters if you have somebody that will love you and mentor you and want you to do well. And so she was certainly somebody like that, and for me, the Christian Brothers were.
Thank you. It's nice to hear about these role models that really were formative for what you were able to develop as love of country and a willingness to sacrifice. Now, we'll get to more about your stories in Vietnam, but I think for all of us, when we think a Medal of Honor recipient, we hold you up in such high regard, and we imagine that you're little 14-year-olds who are just mini Medal of Honor recipients they're just honorable and patriotic. So I know that's not the case here. So could you tell us a little bit more about, before you got into the service, a little maybe, you know, what were your personalities like, your homework habits, maybe connecting with some of our students who might not think of themselves as awesome students or awesome athletes. When you were young and you hadn't really found yourselves yet, what struggles were you facing as a teen before you got into the military service? You had great role models, but how would you describe yourselves as teens before you found the service?
Which one of us?
Let's start with you this time.
You know, I can tell you the reason I got in the service, the thing that, the actual reason I got in the service, but as I said, my whole life was sports. And I came out of high school, all boys Catholic high school, and I had several scholarships to go play football at different universities around the West Coast. At the time, I was stalking this foxy chick. Now, the foxy chick, now I'm broke, I got no money, and the scholarship was a free education for me. So it was enticing, to say the least, but the damn foxy chick, she was going to a university that didn't have a football team, but it had ROTC and it was mandatory. So I hated the whole idea. Now, what the hell am I going to do? So I chose the foxy chick. And that was the best decision I made in my life. We were married for 62 years, and she... But the downside of all that was that I had to be in ROTC. I had to wear that stupid uniform, and I had to salute, and these are other guys just like me, so I hated it, and I did not do well. In fact, I didn't get past the second year. They wanted me to go to summer camp. I had to go to Alaska, make some money. And I married the foxy chick, and she made me go back to school. And so that was it. And then I finished ROTC. A really great person in my life, Major Snyder, with my record, he took me back in to ROTC. And in those days, it wasn't a gimme to get into that program. Otherwise, you got drafted. And so that's how I became a soldier. Reluctant soldier for sure, but thank God for the foxy chick.
What about you, Doc? What about pre-military? Were you a good student? I know you were a stellar athlete, a singer, a man of theater, a Renaissance man, as we talked about. So before the military, how would you describe yourself?
Well, yeah, I was very busy. As I said, I played 4 sports in high school, 3 sports in college. I didn't meet the foxy chick until later in life, and she's right here with us today. Would you stand up, Shirley?
And how long have you been married?
Stand up. So, yeah, I was very busy with my music and my athletics, and so I don't think I would have got in trouble if I will say this to the students. I have never drank, and I've never smoked, and I've never taken drugs, and I don't... And I don't mean that to put anybody else in a different category that make them worse than me. As a matter of fact, if you like your beer, go ahead and drink it. The first time I ever put beer in my mouth, I spit it out, and the guy next to me said, "What's wrong?" I said, "That tastes terrible." And he says to me, honest to God, he said, "Well, you know, you have to acquire a taste for that." And I said, "Why do I want to acquire a taste for something I don't like the taste of?" So that's the reason that I haven't. And another reason was as I became a coach, and I went on to mentor boys. I've been blessed more than I deserve. 135 high school teams in football, wrestling, baseball, American Legion Baseball. Also officiated for 25 years the sport of wrestling. You hope to get one state final as a wrestling official, and I was chosen in the 25 years 18 times to do 18. And so my life, as I say, has been blessed along. I can't say I never got into trouble. I did. I know I went to the principal's office only once in high school, and his son was my best friend, one of my best friends. And I walked in and I said, "Sir, you can do whatever you want to me, but don't call my dad." I don't know how many of you can agree, can identify with that. So I never got in trouble again because the next time I'm sure he might call my dad. But I had a lot of love in my life. People who cared about me, people who really, really tried to find the best that they could find in all of the students and all of the athletes that they mentored. But I think most of all, I don't know if you know this, but every religion has a spot in what I call its good book, Christianity, it's the Bible. The golden rule is in every religion, and there is a verse for that: do unto others as you'd have done unto you. In high school, we said, do unto others you'd have done unto you, but do it first. You know, but if we would follow that golden rule, we wouldn't have to worry about any wars. We wouldn't have to worry about sitting up here with these. But I know that Pat will agree with me. This medal right here belongs to a lot of people. Belongs to 89 men that fought in the battle. Belongs to those that did something brave, and you need 2 eyewitnesses, as you said. But nobody saw them do it. It's the act and not the award that counts the most.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that, you know, somebody asked me one time, what's the common denominator of the medal? And I kind of had to think just a little bit, and then my answer was circumstances. All of a sudden, you're in a set of circumstances, and you have to react to those circumstances. And the really great part of it is that somebody saw what you did, they appreciated it, and they took the time to document it. And that's a difficult process to gather all the stuff that you have to give anybody any kind of an award. And so from the time of my being in the Medal of Honor Society, actually back to the Boxer Rebellion, I knew guys that had the medal from the Boxer Rebellion, World War I, World War II, all the great heroes of World War II. The thing that they made always very, very obvious was that you don't wear it for yourself. And that's what all recipients, I think, believe, and the real true heroes were those who never came home.
Well, thank you. So we talked a little bit about joining the military. You go in, Doc, you end up becoming a frontline medic, and General, you become self-proclaimed the greatest pilot, helicopter pilot in Vietnam. Is that correct?
Yes, well, ever. I prefer
ever.
ever.
Oh, excuse me, the greatest helicopter pilot ever.
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 Even the ones in the Civil War.
So as you go into the military, was there anything in military life that surprised you, that you weren't accustomed to when you first joined? How did that go?
Oh yeah, I didn't join. It took all of the money that I started earning when I was 5 years old to when I graduated for me to pay for, again, I wasn't from a wealthy family, so we had, my brothers and I, my older brother was the first McCloughan to graduate from college and I was the second. But it took all of those years for me to accumulate some money so that I could pay for my own education. Wanted to be a teacher, signed a contract, May 1968. South Haven High School, where my dad had graduated from, gonna coach 2 sports. Man, I cannot wait. Graduated June 4th, 1968. Middle of June, I got a letter from an uncle of mine. Probably heard of him, Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam sent me a letter, and he said, I want you to go to a tropical zone before you start teaching and coaching. So I was devastated when I received that letter. They did try to get me waived from it because the school that I was going to was already short on teachers, and they actually never was able to replace me in the coaching job until the next year. But they rejected all of that, and so there was one point when I graduated from boot camp, and that was at Fort Knox, and I never did see any gold over there. I was the only one in 250 in my unit to be chosen to go to Fort Sam Houston, Texas. And I knew that was very, very rare because you had to be a regular Army and serve for 3 years, in other words, join the Army. I was drafted, I only had to serve for 2, and the people that served for 2 didn't get those kinds of jobs. I called it a positive job in a negative situation. I was saving lives where lives were being taken. I was the only one out of that group in my unit to go to Fort Sam Houston, Texas. And so I said, well, you're not going to go to Canada. My grandpa was in World War I, my dad was in World War II, my uncle was in the Korean War, and my favorite uncle, who was an influence on my life, he was in the United States Coast Guard. And let me tell you something, those guys do some dangerous stuff. If you ever want to look up what the Coast Guard do sometimes, they do some dangerous stuff. But I'll share something. I don't know if I've shared this with too many people. When I found out that I was for sure going to be going to Southeast Asia, I went off into this playground, and I was afraid. You know, all of that time and money, and I finally get to where I want to be, and I might get killed before I really get to be a teacher and a coach. And I sat there and I prayed, and out of nowhere, I heard the Lord say, Jim, you better change your attitude or you won't be coming home and you won't be teaching and coaching. So I went into the military to be the best medic that I could possibly be. And once I concentrated on what my particular men needed from their medic, I won't tell you I was never afraid, but I did not concentrate on my own fear. I wanted to make sure I saved those individuals.
Before you answer, General, about your time, because I think you're tapping into something which is fear, which we all have. And one quote that you said, General, was, "Faith was a substitute for fear." So I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about, as you're both men of faith, deep, devout Christians, I would love to have you talk a little bit about your faith and how that helped get you through a lot of moments, just like with Doc.
Okay, we're going to skip how I got in the military, right?
You go ahead.
So fear is an emotion. Courage is a decision. And I've always said that courage is fear that has said its prayers. And that was so true of me. My faith was everything in my life. No matter where I was or what I was doing, I was always talking to the good Lord, even on the golf course, especially on the golf course. And, but I never, here, when we talk to young people, here's the story I tell them about the relationship between faith and fear. I was never afraid in combat. Now, my fellow Medal of Honor recipient says, BS, Brady, come on. And no, it's true. Now, I've experienced fear in other parts of my life for sure, but in combat, no. Very busy, went in knowing if we got killed doing what we were doing, what a better way to die. And so I always tell the story about this football player, and he was not a very good player. And they were on a train going to a very important bowl game. He got word along the way that his father was ill. He turned around then and went back, and his father died. After the funeral, he rejoined the team at the game and begged the coaches to let him play. Well, as I said, he was not a very good player, but out of respect for what he had been through with his father, the coaches put him in. Figured they'd just take him out before he does any damage. Well, he played sensationally. In fact, he scored the winning touchdown. The coaches, of course, were delighted, and they asked him, how did you do it? What was it? And he says, well, my father was blind all his life, and this was the first time he could see me play. Now, that young man had the courage, the faith, and the courage, that combination to believe that his father was there, and for the first time he could see him play, and he did not want to let him down. So I don't think you can disconnect courage and fear, and very, very important in my life, faith, and I hope that it should be important in other people's life. I can't define it for anyone else. I can define it for myself. Somehow it's a feeling that there's something beyond a particular moment, something worth living and something worth dying for. And there's someone above and beyond all of us who is the source of love and everything else.
And would you like to tell us also if there was anything surprised you, after boot camp when you were sent to Vietnam, when you were adjusting to life there?
No, I didn't go to boot camp. I went to flight school. And then, well, he went to boot camp, poor guy. But
never bothered me.
No, here's what even though I was commissioned, I didn't want to make a career out of the military. I didn't do bad in my last 2 years of ROTC, but that was not, I was going to get out and get rich. And they sent me to Berlin, Germany. And I was in Berlin, Germany, and the beautiful thing about the military is that here I am, I'm a second lieutenant, nobody, and my wife is pregnant with, which one of our kids was it? Second kid, I guess, or third kid, can't remember. I had a bunch of them. And so,
That's that chick.
the foxy chick. So, I mean, it was amazing. Berlin was 110 miles behind the Iron Curtain. You had to take a train, go through the Russian check marks, and get in there. And when I got off the train, there was somebody there to meet me. And they took me to an apartment in downtown Berlin. And there's stuff in the refrigerator. I said, what the hell's going on here? And then the commander's wife, Fred Wine was his name, later became chief of staff of the Army. He was the colonel at the time. I didn't even want to be around a captain, let alone a colonel. And his wife then came to the apartment the next day to see that my wife was all right, because she was going to, I had to lie to get her on an airplane. She had a baby, I think, about 2 weeks after we got there. And so I thought, good Lord, well, what a guy. And then while I was in Berlin, they built the wall. And so I got an up-close personal look at communism, and that woke me up. I mean, my God. And I was a medical platoon leader at the time, and they're shooting their own people off the wall. And my medics had to clean up that mess. And so our babysitter was engaged to someone in the East. Now, before that, the city was divided 4 powers, but they cut it in half, and the East was the Russians and the East Germans, and then the French and the British and the Americans were in the other sectors. And so she was engaged, her fiancé was in the East. They were able to go back and forth just like any place. She never saw him again. Our maid's parents were in the East, and she was not allowed to go to their funeral. And I said, what in the heck is this thing, communism? I ran into it again in Korea, and I ran into it again in Vietnam. But the most important thing that happened to me was I served with some really great soldiers. Fred Wine, as I said, became chief of staff of the Army, my boss. Norm Schwarzkopf, who you may have heard of. Barry McCaffrey. And I'm looking at these guys, and they're contemporaries. They're like me, a lieutenant captain and everything. I said, my God, these are high-quality people. It wouldn't be bad to grow up and be like one of them. And so I was very impressed with the quality of the people in the military, the soldiers and the leaders in the military. And like something, they were a lot like the Christian Brothers, but there was something a little bit beyond all that. So what am I talking about?
You answered it. That was perfect. Well,
but anyhow, that's what I kind of then, the idea was you serve your 3 years and you get out. Well, I served my 3 years, and they sent me to flight school, and then I went to Vietnam. I volunteered, actually, to go to Vietnam because that was where the action was. And this was after I became the greatest helicopter pilot that ever lived.
As we've established. So let's talk about being in Vietnam. Now, one of the most respectable and things I think we don't think about as far as the medical field in war times in Vietnam is being innovative, being creative. You have to come up with solutions that have never existed before in the field, in the moment. You talk a lot in your book about landing helicopters in zones that are unsafe, from topographically, geographically, to enemy fire, just to all the different things in unknown territory you've ever been. So for both of you, I'd love for you to tell us about your job is to save the patient. Your job is to save the lives, and sometimes there aren't prescripted ways to do that, except you're there and you're taking fire. And how did you handle those, and how were you innovative in the field in Vietnam?
Well, I haven't not ever, nor will I ever talk about some of the things that I saw as a combat medic. Even my infantrymen did not see it because I made sure it was in a bag before they could get view of it. I will tell you, though, I held 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in my arms. I heard their last words, and I saw the last breath of life come out of their body. You young people that are in here, that was a long time ago, but I can tell you that your freedom here today has been paid for in full. Now, I like to use the quote from the man that this building's all about. Ronald Reagan put it best. Those individuals gave up 2 lives. They gave up the life, Ronald Reagan said this, that they were leading when they were killed in action. And they gave up the life they never got to live. Never got to meet the chick. They never got to see a birth of a child. Watch that child grow. I got to coach both of my boys. Got to coach them. Never got to walk their little girl down the aisle or dance that father-daughter dance at the end of the ceremony and at the banquet. And every holiday, every birthday, anniversary, and every reunion that there is, whether it's their high school or a family, they're not there. They gave up 2 lives so that you and I can live in the United States of America and choose who we marry, where we go to school, and what good-looking chick we marry. But there are things I won't talk about, but I can tell you this. The 2 sports that I played in college, I played 4 years of college football, and I wrestled for 4 years, and both of them are combative sports. And they both were great physically for the physical part of it. And but it was the mental discipline that I learned from those 2 sports, and especially wrestling. You're out in the middle of the mat, you've got nobody to blame but yourself. It's you against another person. And so many times when he was landing a helicopter, it was him against the environment, him against what was shooting at him. You know, and he had to maneuver to get those guys out of there so that he's really the other part of it that saved their lives to get them to the hospital. So I am convinced that what we did in Vietnam, and people have asked me, would you do that all over again? And here is my answer. Oh, nobody gets up in the morning and says, I hope there's a war I can go to today. I don't believe they do. But there are some lifers that this is the only war we have. We've heard that. But had I not, and these guys got the wrong rap, had I never gone to Vietnam, I would have never met the bravest, kindest, most compassionate, loving individuals that I'd ever met in my life. I would have been cheated out of meeting those men. Here is a stat that a lot of people don't know. 97% of the Vietnam veterans were honorably discharged. There is no other war where, and I'm not taking anything against any other war, but those people who were called the wrong names, honorably discharged, 97% of them.
Wow, thank you. And what about you, the question about innovation? I know there are lots of examples from your military career about being in very unsafe, volatile conditions, and you came up and invented new ways of landing, spotting, strategies in the field. Tell us about that.
Well, as the greatest helicopter pilot, that's to be expected. No, but I didn't do what this guy did. I mean, I was in a nice, clean airplane, and harder than hell to kill, and not down in the mud and the blood, but I did have a real problem with needles, and I had a real problem with blood. And as a matter of fact, the first time they gave me a physical, well, the first time I saw my first baby, I fainted. I mean, and when we were in medical school and they show these thoracentesis and all these kinds of stuff that you do in combat, I would put my head down. I could not look at it. I get sick to my stomach. For some strange reason in Vietnam, I mean, we saw everything, and the human body in every form and figure that you can think of, but I didn't get sick. Now the trick was, we got an incredible human being, Charles Kelly, who's got this beautiful machine, this Huey helicopter, that's beyond anything we'd ever flown before. And you got tremendous challenges with terrain and weather in this country, and with the enemy mixed in with the friendlies, and so it was a real challenge. And so he decided that we were going to pick, there's not going to be an echelon of evacuation, by hand, by whatever, until the hospital got their hands on that patient. He was going to go direct into the battlefield, pick the wounded up, and put them in a hospital. In my unit, my second tour, that was 33 minutes from the time the guy was shot until we had him in an operating room. There's no way he's going to die. 98% of them survived in Vietnam, the ones that we were able to get on our helicopter. But it's a trick to get into that damn place and not get shot up, because you're risking an expensive machine and 4 lives to get maybe just 1 patient out. So we devised different ways to do it. And it used to be, the initial way was just an overhead spiral. It's harder to hit a moving target. And so you tried to be as fast as you could be and be a real fast moving target. And so I got to thinking, you know, there's got to be a better way. So one day we started out, and it was a bad day. We had an engine mechanical problem, had to make a forced landing in the jungle. Went back and got another helicopter, and I'm going into this, going in like this, and my co-pilot got shot. So I had to take him to the hospital and get another aircraft, and I had a vision, I had a picture of that rice paddy where the patients were, and there were burns like this across, and I thought, dang, what if I go out to the edge of those burns, and if I come in low level, and I give them the word when to pop the smoke, and get into the area real low. You would put your eyeballs in the enemy's socket and try to visualize what he could see if you were there trying to shoot me. And so it worked. I got in, you always turned your tail into the fire. I was sitting in one area and the damn rounds were coming through the windshield. But if you got your tail into the fire, then it has to go through the transmission to get anybody in the crew. So that was another approach. They called it the snake approach. But really the greatest thing we found was the weather, how to overcome the weather, which was killing more of our people, more pilots than the enemy by my second tour. And I'm scared to death. I got a bunch of young pilots that just got out of flight school, never been in combat before, a lot of them teenagers. Enthusiastic about saving lives, that's medical evacuation, had a great reputation. And this was their chance to be a part of all that. But the weather was deadly. I got a call one day from a soldier that was on a mountaintop, and the mountaintop was in the clouds about halfway down, and a kid was snake bit. And those snakes in Vietnam were pretty deadly. They said, you know, if you get bit, just lay down so you don't hurt yourself falling. They were deadly. And by the way, the BC would put them in the tailbone of the helicopter so that when the guy went to do the flight, he's got to deal with the snake in there. So I went out, and I tried to go into it, and if you don't have 2 reference points, you don't know if you're upside down or right side out. But I knew that if I fell out in the valley, I would be IFR, I'd be visual. And so, boom, boom, disoriented, fell off. The crew's nervous, the guy's screaming at me that he's going into convulsions. And I said, okay, guys, we got to try one more time. And then in the middle of it all, I'm praying like crazy. Lord, why are you doing this to me? Show me a way. And then back up into the stuff, and I was hit with a gust of wind. That was the breath of God. It blew me sideways, and I had to look out my window. I was looking, hoping to find a hole in the jungle. I looked out my window, and guess what? I could see the rotor blades, the tips of the rotor blades, and I could see the top of the trees. I knew I was right side up. Turned that sucker sideways. The Huey was so powerful, you could stop it at 3,000 feet. And went up the mountain like that. You have to go very careful. Into the area, we got the kid, we got him to the hospital, and I think he lived. That's a technique that we used, that I used, the day that they gave me the Medal of Honor. But from that moment on, from that time on, weather never stopped us, day or night. No matter what, we never, ever left a patient in the field for any reason. Didn't matter how many helicopters it took, how many trips it took, how many people got wounded, we never left anybody in the field.
You've heard of all of the teams that I was on as an athlete and coached, but the biggest and best team that I was ever on was a medical team in Vietnam. I had to get to him, take care of him immediately. He comes in and gets him. We had some of the finest nurses and doctors in Vietnam. There was a 300% higher rate of actually coming out alive than in World War II. I can tell you that's the biggest, and I'm so proud of being on that team right there than any other team I've been on.
Yeah, this is, and of course, your crew in a helicopter is a team. You are a team. One of you can't do it. Everybody has to be involved. Everybody has to be alert. And this is a thing that we try to teach the young people when we go around the country. How important. None of us would have a medal. None of us would have anything if we weren't part of a team. In the military, to have those kind of guys, we have a very simple thing in the military. When we judge another person, we ask very simply, would I want this person with me in combat? And we answer that question. In the military, every one of them is with you in combat. And I tell the story to how important teamwork is, or how different it is. When I was young, I worked in a forest, lumber for lumberjacks. And what they would do then, when they chopped the trees down, they would pull them out with horses. And of course, they would have a horse pulling contest. In one contest, the winning horse pulled 9,000 pounds. The runner-up pulled something less than 9,000 pounds. And so they decided, what could they pull if we made them into a team? As a team, they pulled 27,000 pounds. So that's what teamwork does. Every young person should realize that and as a part of a team, if something bad happens to one person, it happens to all of you. And if something good happens to one person, it happens to all of you. And that same thing is true of our country. And that's what young people should know, how exceptional, how incredibly exceptional this country is, and how lucky they are to be a part of it, and to know that if something good happens to the country, it happens to all of us. If something bad happens to the country, it happens to all of us.
Thank you very much. This hour always goes so quickly. There's never enough time, and I know we have a lot of questions, but I want to end on one more question for the both of you, but following a quote which I love. Soldiers do not fight because they hate those in front of them. They fight because they love those behind them, America. They fight because they love those beside them. And I think both of you just are the epitome of that you are fighting for the brave men next to you. So on that note of soldiers' love for country and for your brothers in the field, what advice do you have for the young people in the audience today? We'll end on that note. What advice do you have for the young people in the audience today, or what kind of parting words, Doc?
As you build your character, it's not the medal that's as important as the action that you do to build that character, okay? I received this medal 48 years after my action, and 2 years after I received it, I got a letter in the mail. This is my story that the action is more important than the award. I opened the letter and it went like this. My name's Austin. You don't know me, I don't know you. but you saved my grandpa in 1969. My mom was born the next year after Grandpa came home with his wounds. In 1970, she was born. Was born in 1991, and last week, my wife and I had a baby boy, and I get to celebrate Father's Day this Sunday because of you. Wow. And I had never thought of it this way. I read that to Cherie with tears in my eyes. She said, Jim, you didn't save 11 people in that battle. You saved 11 family trees. The helicopter pilot saved 11 family trees that day. Those that worked on those men saved 11 family trees. When you do something, don't do it for yourself. You don't do it for the trophy. You do it for the action, and you do it with integrity. You do it because it is the right thing to do. The right thing to do. And whether you ever get any applause or not, those that we wear this medal for that did something just as brave as any soldier's ever done, and they didn't have anybody see them do it, it was the action. We wear this for them. Do something that in the end is bigger than yourself.
So
Thanks, Scott. General?
all right, we had yesterday we had a question from some young people. If you could live your life over again, would you live it differently? And so I sure as heck would. But the idea was that we can't live our lives over again for ourselves, but we can through young people. And so we have a character development program which teaches young people the importance of courage, of sacrifice, and of patriotism. And courage we've defined as a decision, fear, and emotion. Foundation of courage in my mind is faith. Sacrifice, love in action. The person's capacity for sacrifice, I think, is the ultimate measure of human goodness. You do something for somebody else and there's no bottom line, there's nothing in it for you. And as she said, the love of a soldier for his country will cause him to sacrifice for his country, and that will guarantee the security of our country. And patriotism is the third leg of that, and to me, this is what it's all about. America cannot survive if we don't grow patriots. Not people who say they love their country, but people who are willing to support and defend their country. And that's the bottom line. And when I talk about patriotism, I always tell them about a great soldier I knew in Vietnam. Big, powerful black guy. His name was Webster Anderson. And Webster was on a mountaintop in Vietnam during a tropical storm. And the communists, in the initial attack, they pretty much took off both his legs. He kept fighting. The next attack, they threw a hand grenade into his position. Webster caught it, and while he was throwing it clear of his men, it pretty much took off his arm. I flew in that night, and I picked up what was left of Webster and his wounded soldiers, took him to the hospital. Amazingly, they were able to save his life. The physicians, who were some of the truest heroes, and the nurses in Vietnam, and the medics. They were able to save his life, but they didn't save 2 legs and 1 arm. But he did earn the Medal of Honor for that action. Webster and I became very close. And he was more plastic than he was flesh, and 1 arm was a cane. And so when we go out and talk to the young people in the different schools and define for them character and all these kind of things, character is what? It's the you that God knows. Not the you who you know when you're alone, but it's the you that God knows. You can't get around that. And we're in a classroom one time in Oklahoma, the home of artillery. He was an artillery, Webster was an artillery sergeant. And he insisted on standing up, and we'd prop him up, and he'd stand there with that cane. And the young kid in the class raised his hand and said, "Mr. Anderson, knowing what you know now, that it would cost you 2 legs and 1 arm, would you do it again?" And Webster raised his one good arm, and he says, "Young man, I've only got 1 arm left, but my country can have it any time they want." Now that, I'm sure, went through those young people as an example of patriotism that should have been a great inspiration to them.
Thank you.
I always like to end my portion with the biggest lesson I learned in Vietnam. It was the second day of the battle, and I was heard somebody yell, "Medic!" I rushed to the area, and it was a man with a gunshot wound to the abdomen. That's a really very important thing to plug up real quick because you don't want the organs to dry out. Dragged him into a trench line, and now I'm contemplating how am I going to carry this guy out of here. I can't throw him over my shoulder with a fireman's carry like everybody else, or I'll undo what I just did. So I finally decided I would cradle him like a baby. This was one of the times it was good that I was short. I'll hold those bandages against my chest. I'll get as low as I can, and I'll get us out of here through the crossfire in what's called the kill zone. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, a thought came over me. It had been since I was a little boy that I had told my father that I loved him. In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, fathers didn't say that to their boys. I didn't say it to my dad. I'm sure he knew I loved him. I knew my dad loved me, but we didn't say it. And I had a conversation with my Lord. And I said, now you'll know I was so busy. I said, "Lord, if you get me out of this hell on earth so I can look my dad in the face one more time and tell him that I love him, I'll be the best coach, I'll be the best teacher, and I'll be the best dad that I can possibly be." I ran to my father in the O'Hare airport, threw my arms around him. I was 24 years old at the time, told my dad that I loved him, and he said the same thing back to me as if we'd been doing that for 24 years of my life so far. It was our greeting and our departure. I taught my children, my grandchildren, my athletes, my students, 72 assistant coaches, that those are the 3 most important words. And I'm giving you all an assignment. There must be somebody that lately you've been busy and you haven't been able to say those 3 words to. If you can see them face to face, do it. Say those 3 words. If you can't, you've got that darn cell phone of yours. Find out a way to do it that way. But there's a second part to the assignment. Tell them why you love them. This is all about love, as you started out with. It's all about love, as this man has said. And I'm going to tell you what, those helicopter pilots did things that you would not even imagine a human being could do. I'm so proud to know this man, and he is the best.
The greatest helicopter
Thank you
pilot.
very much.
Well, thank you all for your attention during the interview portion. Thank you again to our audience online who isn't able to be here today. We appreciate that they're joining us today. And one more big round of applause for Major General Patrick Henry Brady and Specialist 5th Class Jim Doc McCloughan.